I've got to say, it is getting increasingly difficult in this country to not feel like you're going insane whenever something happens, because regardless of how insignificant a particular story is, the right has got to find a way to twist it and spin it to suit their narrative. It can be anything. A movie came out and the actors were announced. Well, it's not just that the actors were announced, it's woke actors that were announced. A tragedy happened, but it's not just something that was innocuous. Well, it was done by the left or because of the left. They're always finding a way to spin stories, and we cannot live in a society with half the country basically living in this post-truth America that they're trying to force all of us to live in as well. It's not just that they're liars, it's that they're fundamentally anti-truth. So I want to talk about the Vance Boelter story. This was an individual who assassinated a Minnesota state representative named Melissa Hortman and her husband. He also injured a state senator named John Hoffman and his wife. They survived, thankfully, but I mean, he showed up to their house. He had a list of 70 other targets, including federal and state lawmakers, as well as abortion rights activists. And he went to multiple homes of lawmakers, reportedly stalking his victims as if they were prey, according to authorities. And he did this by impersonating a police officer. And he had a police van. At least he decked out his own van to look like a police van. So, I mean, this was a very coordinated assassination effort, and Governor Walz says that this attack was indeed politically motivated, and that is highly likely. He was a far-right, Trump-supporting christofascist who preached intolerance, and the fact that he specifically sought out Democratic lawmakers tells you that, you know, if you connect the dots, yeah, it does seem as if this is the case. There is no manifesto. Nonetheless, it's pretty obvious what's happening. Nonetheless, that hasn't stopped the right from lying about his politics, because he was formally appointed to an advisory board by Governor Tim Walz. And we know why they're lying about his politics, because it makes them look bad that a right-winger would do something like this. Nonetheless, what they're doing is they're finding a kernel of truth, and they're making large logical leaps based on said kernel of truth. So because he was on a board and Governor Walz appointed him, well, that's evidence that this man isn't just a Democrat, but he, I guess, worked with Tim Walz. We'll get to their reactions. Nonetheless, the New York Times reports that Mr. Bolter had served on a state economic board with one of the victims, State Senator John A. Hoffman, who survived the shooting, though it is unclear if they actually knew each other. Mr. Bolter was appointed to the panel, the Minnesota Governor's Workforce Development Board, in 2016 by a Democratic former governor, Mark Dayton. The board has 41 members appointed by the governor, and its members try to improve business development in the state. He was later reappointed by Governor Tim Walz, also a Democrat. Current and former members of the board said that there were a handful of meetings each year and that there was often no direct interaction with the governor. One said the governor had not attended any of the group's meetings in her 4 years on the board. They said it would be easy for two members not to know each other. Now, we don't have all of the details, but based on what we know thus far, that information tells me that, okay, he was very politically active. He was appointed to a board. He has some prominence in Minnesota politics. It doesn't scream, oh, he's coordinating with the governor to carry out assassinations of members of his own party. That is genuinely insane. And when you see some of the reactions from right-wingers, you'll understand what I mean by saying that they're actually making this insinuation. Now, this is where things start to get even worse, because mainstream media, they also take information like that and they make it seem as if his motives are more unclear. Case in point, CNN platformed somebody who said this.
It's a very confusing motive, because this guy was appointed to a political position by Tim Walz. So now he's attacking Democrats. So you have to try to figure out where he is with a lot of confusing different messages.
Now, perhaps this information would complicate the situation and make the picture a little bit more unclear had we not known what the roommate said before he went on CNN and said that, because the roommate basically says what the other information out there confirms, that this individual was a right-wing evangelical Christo-fascist preacher, and he was very much a Republican who supported Donald Trump. For example, here's what his roommate said about the individual who carried out these assassinations.
Well, everyone's calling him a Democrat. He's not a Democrat. He would be offended if people called him a Democrat. He because of this board thing he was on for Governor Walz, it wasn't to serve. He was just serving the community.
Any politicians he mentioned?
Well, he mentioned Nancy Pelosi. He didn't like Jim Walz.
Tim Walz?
Didn't like Jim Biden. But
Tim Walz, what would you say about him?
well, I mean, nothing. I mean, it's just normal. Well, I don't like this that Tim Walz did this. I don't like that he did that.
And did he listen to any particular podcasts or TV shows or anything online that concerns you?
Well, you listen to InfoWars, but I kind of said, well, it's like 50% truth. And, I kind of said, don't take everything what they say for granted. I wasn't a real truthful. I mean, they're on for some things, but some things are way off on.
Did he talk much about Trump? And what did he say, if so?
I was a Trump supporter. Voted for Trump. You like Trump? I like Trump. And,
So on one hand, he was reappointed to a nonpartisan political board by Governor Tim Walz. But on the other hand, he watched InfoWars and hated Nancy Pelosi and Joe Biden and Tim Walz and was a Trump supporter for all intents and purposes. It's hard to tell what his motivations were. It must mean that he was a Democrat who coordinated with Tim Walz to carry out this attack. I mean, the level of dishonesty truly is hard to even wrap my mind around. Not that I'm surprised by the extent to which the right lies, but just the confidence that they expressed when saying these lies. And it's not just random right-wing dickheads. We're talking about sitting U.S. senators. So let me show you how the right reacted to this story after we had so much information already out there. Sitting U.S. Senator Mike Lee tweets, "This is what happens when Marxists don't get their way." So it's not just that he was a Trump-supporting Republican. He was a Marxist. He was a far leftist, and he did this. He also tweeted out "Nightmare on Wall Street." So already making jokes about this when if something like this were to happen on the other side, that any sitting U.S. lawmaker on the left or the center left who joked about this would be ostracized endlessly. We have Alex Jones, who he was a fan of, saying Tim Walz's associate has been captured. The whole thing does not add up. Yeah, I bet it doesn't add up because you don't want to admit that he was a fan of yours. You have James Woods saying, "Resign, Tim Walz. Your violent rhetoric is costing too many lives." And even though it's absurd to suggest that Tim Walz's rhetoric would somehow encourage a Trump supporter to do violence against Democrats, it's less insane than what Laura Loomer said, who tweeted to Tim Walz, "Your friend murdered her. Hopefully you are investigated," insinuating that Tim Walz is culpable here. You have MAGA Voice, a massive right-wing account on Twitter, saying, "Arrest Minnesota Governor Tim Walz," because of course he had something to do with this, obviously. Alec Lace, another right-wing dickhead with a podcast, tweeted, "Melissa Hortman sounded fearful after voting to repeal healthcare for illegal aliens, almost as if she knew that her base would become unhinged. She and her husband were tragically shot and killed. A targeted attack per Governor Walz. Was her vote the motive?" Benny Johnson says assassin and Tim Walz associate Vance Boelter is in custody after surrendering to police. Yes, because I'm sure that they were besties. Now, in this viral tweet, this person blames the left for other murders, saying the left has become a full-blown domestic terrorist organization. Very ironic coming from a right-winger. And Elon Musk retweeted that, saying the far left is murderously violent. So they just straight up make shit up and don't give a fuck about the truth. They have no regard whatsoever for what is true and what is false. They are creating a reality for everyone to live in. Again, they're not just liars, they are anti-truth. But this is fundamental to fascism. If you go back to World War II, you can see a lot of the hyperbole and lies from the Nazis. It mirrors what we're seeing from the right today, which isn't surprising because this is a modern day Nazi movement, but they have to create a sense of hysteria and demonization always of the opposition, so that way it justifies all of the repression against their political enemies that they're doing currently. So the lies are lies. They're not stupid. They're not misinformed. I don't want you to be under the delusion that these people don't know what they're saying. They know what they're saying. They are choosing to lie deliberately. And it's time that we push back against these lies. I understand that Trump is flooding the zone and there's so much misinformation right now that it's hard to keep up. But especially when U.S. senators like Mike Lee stoop to this level and lie like this so brazenly, you can't just let that go. You have to call it out and apply pressure to that individual because we have to have standards. You can't just have U.S. senators saying whatever the fuck they want, regardless if it's true or not. That is insane. Can you imagine if any Democrat lied on this level about the right? I mean, you would never hear the end of it. Fox News would mobilize, RNN would mobilize, OAN would mobilize, every single podcaster on the right would mobilize. They would all repeat ad infinitum that this Democrat is lying. But I mean, Mike Lee just says something like that, and nobody bats an eye because the right lies, and we all just kind of accept that this is what they do. It's ridiculous. Now, the truth matters, and I will never, ever relent to these fucking demons who think it's okay to just lie about every single thing. And here's some numbers about who does the violence in this country. When you look at raw numbers for mass killing events based on ideology, these numbers right here from the ADL, back when they were useful actually, are consistent with statistics from the FBI about the sustained threat from the right-wing white supremacist violence that we continue to see in this country. As you can see, the number of left-wing attacks pale in comparison to right-wing attacks. This is something they will never ever acknowledge because it makes them look bad. They don't care about the truth, they care about the narrative. Now, between 2013 and 2022, there's been 444 total deaths perpetrated by right-wing extremists, which accounts for 75% of total deaths by all extremists. Now, murders by left-wing extremists accounted for just 4% overall. Moreover, nearly a third of Republicans think that Americans must resort to violence to get the country back on track. Compare that to independents and Democrats, and you can see that the side that's more inclined to do violence is the right, and it's not even close. But yet, the right has brainwashed the country into believing that the left is overwhelmingly violent. Because, you know, they're doing all of these riots and whatnot. Now, first and foremost, when you see mass mobilization, they're overwhelmingly peaceful. So they won't tell you that, and the media plays into this narrative at the behest of fascists. But when you look at the targeted incidents of violence on the left, overwhelmingly, it's property damage. You know, burning Waymos. I'm assuming those weren't right-wingers. I'll be honest about that. I'm assuming that left-wingers did that. That's property. The violent coming from the right typically isn't property damage. It's damage to human beings, which is exponentially worse. So to the extent that there is a threat of physical violent extremism to human beings in this country, it is unquestionably coming from the right. And it has been this way for a very long time. But that hasn't stopped them from characterizing the left as more violent because it suits their narrative. And to play into this narrative, they just make shit up about things. Like when there's a shooting, they'll say, oh, well, you know, it's a trans person. Probably this person was trans, even though there's no evidence for that, because trans people are overwhelmingly more violent than cis people. They just make shit up. I mean, they talk about Riley Gaines, for example, on the subject of trans people, as if she was denied this victory from a trans woman when she tied for 5th with Leah Thomas. Like, they have no fucking regard for the truth, and I'm so sick of this. See, when facts aren't on your side, you can't just make shit up. You can't just pretend as if things are a way that they aren't. But that's what they do, and it's what they've been doing for a very long time. They pretended that Obama was a Muslim because his middle name was Hussein. They just make shit up, and they don't give a fuck, and this is how it's been for a very long time. How are we supposed to survive as a country when we have half of the country fundamentally dishonest like this? They have a problem with the truth. Trump lies more than any other politician in American history, and now the base and politicians do the same. I mean, you have to hold these people accountable. And I actually agree with The View for once, as nauseous as that makes me to say, because they actually recommended that we all raise our collective standards as a country and we stop tolerating these blatant fucking lies.
And elected officials, speaking of them, you've got Mike Lee out of Utah, who is either mocking what happened here when he tweets things like, this is what happens when Marxists don't get their way, or nightmare on Wall Street. This was within hours of the loss of life and the brutal attack in these people's homes. In any other job, you would be fired instantly. I don't know what is wrong with our government that someone is not immediately removed or punished. And what I would say is right now, if the HR of our government does not solve this problem, the people better be watching. This man is back up. It's a minute. It's like 2028. But being on the ground right now and coordinating how you replace people like this that can speak that way about other Americans.
Well, you do it by voting.
I'm putting this in the hands of the people who are supposed to be representing us. If you're not going to represent us, then don't run for office, because this is not the way to do it. And to what you said, if your first response is not, what the hell is going on, you should not be running for anything.
Did Mike Lee take that tweet down?
No, they're up.
No, it's up.
Pinned. It's pinned. He's proud of it.
Is it really?
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I don't think that voting is enough. I think that there needs to be pressure on individuals like Mike Lee to resign. He's in a position of power, okay? And he is supposed to be leading by example, but yet he's claiming that the shooter was a Marxist. That is so outrageously false that anything short of resignation is unacceptable. I mean, there needs to be a standard in this country that when politicians blatantly lie like that there should automatically be pressure for them to resign. It should be a scandal that's nonstop. And I understand that we're flooded with information and we can't focus on every single thing. But like, there are some lines that we have to draw, and lying this blatantly, that should be a line that we draw. You have to have standards. If I said something outrageously false on this program, I would immediately face blowback, right? People would unsubscribe. They would attack me. They would accuse me of being a liar. They'd never forget it. They would stop watching if I chose to jeopardize my own credibility by lying to suit a particular narrative. Now, why is the standard for politicians lower than it is for a YouTuber like myself? I'm not saying there should be low standards for us. We should be held to a very high standard. But why is the standard not as equally high for a fucking U.S. senator? I mean, imagine if you went to McDonald's and the drive-through person didn't give you back your $10 and change, but they said that they did. That person would be written up at a minimum, but they'd likely be fired. Why are the standards for minimum wage workers higher than they are for a U.S. politician? Do you understand the problem? It's so ridiculous. But then the same people who perpetuate these lies and that actually call for violence themselves, now they're clutching their pearls about the rhetoric coming from the left because they've already just like agreed that we're going to say that this was a left-winger who did this. For example, there's Randy Fine. And in response to a tweet from Rashida Tlaib, where she condemned Israel's starvation of Palestinians, he responded by calling her a terrorist, saying, "Tell your fellow Muslim terrorists to release the hostages and surrender. Until then, starve away." He added, "Hey, Muslim terrorists, cry harder." I'm bringing him up because he went on CNN and he had a lot of ironic things to say. And thankfully, the host called him out on the ironic things that he said. Let's watch.
You're hearing from Jeffries, you're hearing from other congressional Democrats who are asking for more police protection after that assassination and attempted assassination of lawmakers in Minnesota. Would you vote to grant more security for all members of Congress?
I don't agree with Hakeem Jeffries on much, Sarah, but on this I do. As a member of the Florida legislature, I actually had 2 people arrested, prosecuted, and locked up for making death threats against me and my family. So I understand the threat that this faces, and we do need to provide more security for legislators. It's absolutely needed.
I do want to talk to you about some of the rhetoric, because there's a lot of talk about rhetoric and how this gins people up. A few years ago, you were called out for calling a school board member a whore in a text. You've called one of your congressional colleagues a terrorist. Are you part of the problem here?
Well, look, I think what people write in private text messages to each other is one thing. If I had said that in a public message, I'd understand. But I do think there are issues. Look, when we have protests on Saturday calling something no kings, when Donald Trump isn't a king, he's been elected overwhelmingly by the American people, and it's compared to the revolution. I mean, that is a call for violence. When people are waving signs that say 86-47, I think we've heard this discussion about taking down the temperature after President Trump was assassinated twice, and I don't think people are getting the message. So this is
Are you
real.
not getting the message too?
And we all have
to be fair, is it fair to say that the way that you speak to your colleagues, what you say about them, and the fiery rhetoric that you also use is also an issue that you're thinking about maybe changing?
It's a fair point, but I think fiery rhetoric is different than a call for violence. Calling evil for what it is, calling danger for what it is acceptable. It's when you cross that line and you say, and that person should be killed. That's never a line that I've crossed, nor do I think it should be done. But we saw that kind of rhetoric just on Saturday at these protests. And I think that is a problem. We've seen it repeatedly with President Trump for years, and I do think it's a problem.
Fiery rhetoric is different than a call for violence. He's never called for violence. Well, let me show you Exhibit B, where he called for the biggest form of violence possible. He called for nuking Gaza just weeks ago.
In World War II, we did not negotiate a surrender with the Nazis. We did not negotiate a surrender with the Japanese. We nuked the Japanese twice in order to get unconditional surrender. That needs to be the same here. There is something deeply, deeply wrong with this culture, and it needs to be defeated.
What's that again about fiery rhetoric being different than a call for violence? What would he call that? Is that just fiery rhetoric? Or are we not able to file that under a call for violence. You just said that the entire population of Palestinians in Gaza should be nuked. They'd all be killed. 2 million people. But that's not a call for violence. Again, they just make shit up. They don't give a fuck. They could say something on Tuesday and then say the opposite on Wednesday and never expect anyone to question them. I think this is a failure of institutions, it's a failure of media, and it's a failure on ourselves, because I get it, like, we're all just tired. It's hard to call out every single lie and fact check every wrong thing that they say, but we have to raise the standards. And I don't know how you do that. I genuinely don't know how to make it more scandalous when these politicians brazenly lie, but it starts by condemning it at the individual level. It might not make that big of a difference, but we have to at least make it so that way we're clear that we're not going to tolerate not just like lies, but anti-truth bullshit. I mean, again, it would be one thing if they are misled or they accidentally misspeak or inadvertently spread misinformation, but they're saying the opposite of reality, and they're portraying that as the truth, and then media oftentimes makes it seem as if they're like good faith actors when they're not. They are liars. That's what fascists do. They lie. There's no both sides. They are liars, and they don't have an equally compelling point compared to their political opponents. They're just lying. So this was really frustrating to me, not because, you know, I'm new to the lies that the right spreads, but because I feel like they're getting more blatant, and we're just letting them get away with this, and we shouldn't. We need to call it out every single time we see it, because if we don't actually stick up for the fucking truth, the bare minimum, if we don't live in reality as a country, we are cooked, truly.
Like, everywhere there's glows. You see them all the time. I mean, it's constant. My children will be like, Mama, glow, 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 glow. I turn on TV, there's glows in the background. Every TV show, news media, why?
Glow, 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 glow. They're everywhere. Glow, 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 glow.